have an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J, and co-hosting with me live in London today is my good friend, Johnny Webb. Of course, he'll be joining us hour two. And as always, we have a fantastic show for you today. First, let's give some shout outs to the people who are on. Of course, I see here Wise Frog, always ready for the show. Lou Sheehan is also there. I do see Maria Saley's also. And of course, Danny from Nollins. Congratulations to both of you for winning the tickets. And did I say Lucien? Yes, I did. Now, first, before we bring on our fantastic guests for today, some quick UFO news for you. Now, it's been well over a week since the Roswell slides have been released, and just as we thought, they have brought more questions than answers. The current news is that they have been debunked as a mummy, a 2-year-old Native American boy that was passed away in 1898 and was on loan from the Smithsonian to a museum in San Francisco. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. So anybody out there listening and would like to talk about that, feel free to shoot me an email, which you could do so on the website. Another piece of UFO news. Now, this has been going on for quite some time. Back in January, NASA held a conference in DC, and the conclusion was life outside the Earth does exist, 100%. And they gave us nothing else other than that. Well, more recently, they said that we will find extraterrestrial life in 20 years. And a lot of researchers are saying, well, that's not the case. They're not going to find it in 20 years. It sounds more like they're going to give us the news in 20 years. Another piece of UFO news is a fleet of 14 objects that looked really strange. They don't quite have wings. They have little, you have to see the pictures. You really do. I'll post the link on my site so everybody can see it. 14 of them flying over Madrid, approximately 8 kilometers high, and distance, the size of them was about 3.5 to 5 kilometers each. Now, 2 more pieces of news I'd love to give you all that are just as breaking news that I would love to confirm or deny. This is a CIA agent on his deathbed made a confession that he killed Marilyn Monroe. We get a lot of these lately. Now, is it true? How can we verify it? We don't know. The other final piece of news is, have you ever heard of the Peppy monster? The Peppy monster is a monster apparently living in a lake in Minnesota. Sunday, May 24th, I believe. I don't know if it's Sunday. Yes, Sunday, May 24th, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. They are doing a hunt for the Peppy monster with a $50,000 prize if you find him. You can find all that information at chadlewisresearch.com. Again, chadlewisresearch.com. Now, I have 2 amazing guests for you. One dropped off, so if you all bear with me, you're going to hear the ringing as we bring them on first. And then we're going to introduce the other fantastic guest. And you've all heard him before because he's been on recently. Let's see if we get him on now without any disconnections.
Okay.
There we go. We are back. Mr. Bassett, we are live. I wanted to introduce you as the man who has done more for disclosure, literally in the history of ufology. 2 years ago to this month occurred the citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. Over 40 military witnesses and researchers testified in front of a mock congressional hearing with 5 retired congressmen and 1 retired senator. All 6 came in with an open minds, and left believing without a doubt 2 things. A, we have been visited since at least 1947 by a race not originating from this planet that has been engaging planet Earth. And B, that the United States government has been covering this up since at least 1947. And with that being said, one of the highest ranking American politicians who presided over the citizen hearing is also on, and that happens to be former Congressman Merrill Cook. Congressman, welcome to the show as well.
Well, thank you, Dr. J. It's a real pleasure to be on with Stephen Bassett, the man I got to know 2 years ago and admire greatly.
and the man who set you on the path to finally advocating for disclosure. Now, I want to turn it over to you, Mr. Bassett. Tell us what has transpired since we last spoke to you when the DVDs were about to be sent to all 535 members of the Senate and the House.
Well, I'll try to be as brief as possible as I want time for Merrill. We were going to ship the DVDs with the full record of the citizen hearing and the testimony, 30 hours, to Congress, originally on April the 8th of last year. But we didn't do it. Nevertheless, I didn't cancel that really until March 31. And as it happens, President Bill Clinton scheduled himself on Jimmy Kimmel April 2 and asked Kimmel to ask him about extraterrestrials, which Kimmel did. And you can find this on the internet quite easily. He went on about 5 minutes, and he referred to things he supposedly did in his second term and what have you, and then talked about ETs in other ways. This was a response to the Congressional Hearing Initiative and the beginning of the Congressional Hearings Initiative, and a response to the citizen hearing on disclosure. He, anticipating that this material was about to be sent to Congress, knowing that the first day has 3 hours of testimony regarding the Rockefeller Initiative and the Clintons' involvement, he was inoculating himself. As it happens, we did not ship on the 8th. We had problems, and so the actual beginning was until November 5. So on November 5, we shipped the DVDs. We launched a social media campaign. We generated about 1.5 million Twitter and Facebook messages to Capitol Hill, letting them know we're coming. The publicist got into the game around December the 1st. I sent out the first request to meet on January the 3rd, 170 verbal requests, 270 offices of 7 committees. We were working on that through January, and then in early February, I narrowed it to 5 committees and sent out fax requests to, again, requesting meetings with staffers on both the Senate and the House side. The first one went out on the 3rd, and the second one went on the 8th or 9th of February. This was a one-page fax request with a very long paragraph in it about the Rockefeller Initiative, went to 93 members of the Intelligence and the Space and Science committees. Only a few days after that fax went off is when John Podesta, upon leaving his job at the White House as advisor to President Obama and about to take over the job as advisor to Secretary Clinton, the leading candidate to be the next president. He is actually now the chairman of her campaign. On the day he left the White House, he put a tweet up in which he stated, and this is quite amazing, my biggest regret for 2014 was once again not getting the hashtag disclosure of the UFO files, and he copied Maureen Dowd of the New York Times. That hashtag disclosure was the exact same hashtag that we were using on all of the Twitter and Facebook messages we generated throughout November, December, and January. This was an absolutely astounding move on his part. It was clearly a response, again, to the Congressional Hearing Initiative and the fact that the Rockefeller Initiative was very likely going to be something he and the Clintons were going to have to deal with. He was inoculating himself. That tweet generated quite a bit of press and resulted in the media turning up in a bigger way, resulting in a very substantial article by Roll Call newspaper, one of the key Capitol Hill newspapers. A huge article about everything we were doing, the Congressional Hearing Initiative, Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, had graphics of the facts that were sent, and it had a link directly to the Rockefeller Initiative and the documents confirming it on the Roll Call website. That's still up now, be up indefinitely. That was a very significant development, right? And that resulted in getting calls back from Capitol Hill, which triggered the beginning of the meetings in early March, about March the 1st. I started meeting with staffers on both the Senate and the House side. These meetings were underway through the early March, which resulted, I believe, in another interesting development. March the 13th, Barack Obama, President Obama, scheduled himself on Jimmy Kimmel's show. Easy to find this on YouTube, not a problem. And he asked him to ask him about the extraterrestrial issue, which Kimmel did, virtually the exact same question he had posed to President Clinton back in April the 2nd of last year. And then he gave a very deft, clever answer to it, saying things with a bit of a smirk, but very likely could be substantive, and it was over. This was a response to the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Barack Obama was somewhat inoculating himself because he is now tied very closely to the Clintons, and therefore the Rockefeller Initiative coming out, becoming news, becoming something they have to deal with, was going to affect him. And keep in mind that Barack Obama's administration is on record as of November the 4th of 2011 stating there's no evidence at all for any of this and no evidence that the government has hidden anything. So he has an even bigger problem as this issue unfolds. So that occurred on March the 13th, and that triggered then another major article in Mother Jones magazine, a substantial interview resulting in a huge article. This is the most progressive magazine in the country. Like the roll call article, had a huge amount of material in it, links to everything, videos, the works, and it also had a link to the Rockefeller Initiative documents on my website, which is, again, the second time since 1995 that there has been a mainstream press reference to this. Only the second time since 95. That was on there. In addition, he actually sent a query into the Clinton campaign asking for a response on this Rockefeller Initiative issue. It is the first time the media has put a query into the Clintons on this since the Rockefeller Initiative began 22 years ago. And he got a quick response back from Secretary Clinton's spokesman, one of her spokesmen, Nick Merrill, who, very unlikely he even checked with Secretary Clinton on this. And he published that response in Mother Jones. Namely, Merrill stated that the campaign has a strict policy of not commenting on anything extraterrestrial, but the truth is out there. So that is the first thing that the Clintons have said about this. That's the first response from their world on this issue. A flippant, no, we don't comment on this. That was a mistake, but Nick Merrill doesn't know that. So shortly after that, the day after that article appeared, I went to Canada on a speaking tour. I spoke in 4 cities up there, a lot of interest. Then I spoke at IONS, the Institute of Genetic Sciences, in Petaluma, and then got back and am now building up for a new round of meetings. That's what's going on. Things are moving inexorably towards what I think is now inevitable, and that is very soon there's going to be a break, and a major news venue is going to confront the Clinton campaign with multiple questions about the Rockefeller Initiative, which poses a huge problem for John Podesta, who is their chief advisor and strategist. They don't know exactly what to do, but they've been inoculating themselves. And all of this is possible because of the citizen hearing on disclosure and its success. And the key to that success was the fact that we were able to have 6 former members of Congress be on the committee so we could hold these mock hearings in the National Press Club main ballroom, and given it the gravitas and the international appeal that it had. And Merrill Cook, of course, was one of the first people to sign up. His scientific background, did a fantastic job. He came in with an open mind, became very impressed by the evidence, which was demonstrated throughout the citizen hearing on disclosure. And he, along with the other 5 members of Congress, made history during that week, April 29, May 3. And that history is still unfolding, and you may see some major developments within the next 60 days.
Congressman, I'm actually going to turn it to you. You've had such an outstanding career in the government. You served as a congressman from 96 to 2004. You were on several committees. Some of the most notable ones that are applicable to this was the Space Committee, the Science Committee, the Aerospace Committee. What was it about the citizen hearing that stuck out to you? Because the reason I'm asking this is you are among the top former government officials that's speaking out. As a matter of fact, the most active. You are the only one that has done multiple radio shows. Senator Gravel did a few, but you're the only one that's actively participating. As a matter of fact, you will also be appearing at Contact in the Desert alongside Stephen Bassett and, for me with that matter, on the same panel, the disclosure panel. What is it that stuck out in your mind to start advocating for disclosure?
Well, I want to first say that Stephen Bassett has done a masterful job. I mean, the fundraising, the effort, everything he did to put together that mock hearing there at the National Press Club 2 years ago was beyond my wildest imagination when I was asked to participate. I really got to give this credit to Stephen Bassett. I have to say that no one I'm aware of has systematically put together an approach that is actually changing the minds of significant government officials in this country. That's what Stephen Bassett did, not only there, but as he travels around the globe, holding these meetings, of course, a featured speaker all over the place. And I just want you to know, Stephen, I'm honored that you asked me to participate, advisory board, and all this other thing with your, the PRG group, the Paradigm Research Group that you head up. And I just got to say that you're nice to say those nice things about me, but I'm going to just quickly mention something about John Podesta. I got to know him very well. He worked for, of course, Bill Clinton when I was in the Congress and would show up in my office quite regularly. John Podesta is one of the most honorable, honest guys I know. We don't share party affiliation, but John Podesta was absolutely serious and committed to his lifelong pursuit of truth when he said that was his greatest disappointment, leaving the White House in 2014, just last year as he left to take over as the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton. And, I've got to say that if anybody can convince what odds makers are now saying, and it won't be with my vote, I have to admit, but Hillary Clinton has probably got an 80% chance of ending up in the White House. It's my feeling that John Podesta has got the same type of integrity that people like former New Mexico Governor and Secretary Richardson has, who was fought hard as governor to get files on Roswell opened up. That I really do think that John Podesta is going to be a real influence to helping Steve Bassett achieve his goal, which has been very clear of knocking down the truth embargo that he has so eloquently talked about. And I thank you for the kind comments. I did enjoy that. I tried to ask penetrating questions, and I'd like to continue to do that with some of the great ufologists you have lined up for the Joshua Tree event at the end of the month. And I couldn't be more delighted to be able to participate in that as well. And Stephen, it will be so great to see you again after not seeing you for a couple of years.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Congressman.
Well, Congressman, as you were part of the Space Committee, clearly this would have been a topic that should have been within that committee. When you were during your tenure as Congressman, did any inkling of extraterrestrial life or anything along those lines ever come into discussion in that Space Committee?
Yes, it did, but not. I can't remember, quite honestly. I'd have to go back and check all, my everything, but because there were a lot of hearings and a lot of things that we did with Rohrabacher, who was the chairman of the Space Committee at the time, Dana Rohrabacher, who did a good job on that. I had many discussions with Congressman Rohrabacher, who absolutely believed, as I did, that as I expressed in Washington, that even my religious upbringing taught me that there has to be life outside of the earth. So when I would hear comments that the religionists are fighting this whole thing about trying to understand the source of unidentified flying objects, that the religionists try to say, well, it can't be true. That's not necessarily true with Mormon theology, as I pointed out back in Washington. And so, I've been more than open-minded. I would love to find, I really appreciated being able to find some of the evidences for things that I believed were true, but didn't have the maybe the scientific knowledge or the understanding, or at least the experience in listening to people that have witnessed things that I was able to get there in the hearings that Steve had organized. So, but I can't really say that other than just private discussions, there were any hearings that I remember in the Space Committee, and I went down to Orlando a number of times, and they even met with Governor Jeb Bush, and I had discussions with him on it, who seemed to share the same beliefs. So I think it was common for members of the Space Committee to believe in extraterrestrial sources for the unidentified flying objects, but can't really say that there were specific hearings. Certainly nothing that approached the quantity and even quality of the evidence that was brought forth in the hearings that in 2013. It was in 2013 at the National Press Club.
I think that the witnesses was really superior to anything that had ever been done, and the event that Mr. Bassett put on really trumps everything else in the exopolitics world. Now, Mr. Bassett, Congressman Cook is clearly the highest-ranking vocal politician that's active in this sense, meaning that he's doing these radio shows, he's going to be speaking at Contact in the Desert, as well as other events, because he knows the intricate system of how these hearings work, because he was actually part of them. How are you planning to use him from being on the advisory board and beyond?
Well, as we get closer, I'm going to draw on the members of the committee as possible. Carolyn Kirkpatrick and I are in touch. Mike Gravel and I are in touch. One thing I'm going to mention to Merrill tonight is that I have already started having meetings on the Hill. So if you have any connections on the Hill that you want to possibly privately contact about meeting with me, again, all of the meetings I have on the Hill are confidential. I make it quite clear I'm not going to discuss names or anything until I have approval from the other parties, so that these doors will be open to me. Remember, we're dealing in a truth embargo. So, Merle, certainly the time to make some contacts if you're of that mind.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I wish I had talked to you a week ago, actually, Stephen, because I just come back from Washington. I was there Monday and Tuesday on a different assignment, meeting with some of my former colleagues, and I would love to be, and I know I'll be going back again on the same contract I have with a group that's asked me to do some small-scale lobbying for them, and I'm definitely going to be in touch with you before I go to Washington again to make sure that I can either meet up with you or any particular members of the Congress that you might recommend I ought to go talk to.
Yeah, sure. I think my first thing is the individuals that you know you have relationships strong enough that you can privately approach them without creating a kerfuffle.
Sure.
And if you can do that, great. But again, we'll meet here the next time you're here, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, this process takes a bit of time, but I think we have to remember, and of course, Congressman Merrill really pointed this out. And this is the crazy dynamic they're dealing with. Understand, just based on the polling, I think we can be confident that half of all of the staffers on the Hill, which is about 10,000 people working up there with these 535 offices, as well as the members, about half of them personally, are convinced, by whatever amount of information they've achieved in their life, that this phenomenon is extraterrestrial. But there's a truth embargo underway. It's highly developed and almost institutionalized. And so even though you may believe personally or are convinced that the ET presence is real, you don't talk about it. And that, of course, is the problem we're trying to solve. There has not been a hearing on the Hill about the extraterrestrial presence issue since a one-day hearing in 1968. There have been a few hearings in the Science and Space Committees or subcommittees where they talked about the extraterrestrial issue from the standpoint of, is there microbial life out there? Should SETI get more funding, looking for signals, and so forth? The safe stuff. There's been a couple of those.
Right. That's true. There were hearings on that. I remember very well now.
And that's fine, but of course the ETs are already here, so we need to have hearings about that.
The Contact in the Desert is labeled actually by LA Weekly now as the world's largest UFO event. It's got several speakers, and as I mentioned earlier, we are all on the disclosure panel. Mr. Bassett, if I'm not mistaken, you're in it, but are you also moderating it?
Yeah, I'm moderating this panel. The Contact in the Desert is now one of, if not the largest conference on this. They're going to have between 1,000 and 2,000 people. They have 50 speakers overall on Saturday at 7 p.m. in the outdoor amphitheater. We're going to have the disclosure panel. This may be the highlight for many of the conference. It's going to be absolutely packed. As it happens, there are 10 speakers at this conference which were at the citizen hearing. And so all 10 of those are slated to be on the disclosure panel along with Dr. J, who was, I've been very supportive of this for a long time, and of course very instrumental in helping to get Merrill there. So you're going to be on there. So, but we have 10 people. That's almost a quarter of the speakers, or rather the witnesses at the citizen hearing. And we're going to be talking about everything that's going on. We have a 2-hour panel. We're going to take questions from the audience. So this is going to be a pretty substantial 2-hour presentation. Let us hope it doesn't rain, but we're talking California, so not much chance of that, right?
That's right.
And it'll be a major part of the event. And I hope that a lot of people will come to the CITD and support this very large, expanding conference, and also come to this disclosure panel. I'm also doing a presentation on Friday and a workshop on Sunday, and all the other people on the panel are participating and have presentations. So there's a huge amount of presence for the disclosure issue. This simply reflects the fact that, this is no longer the era of the UFO. It's the era of extraterrestrial phenomena research activism. And we're not talking about UFOs anymore. We're talking about the extraterrestrial presence, and the process leading to disclosure is moving further to the front of the line, featured in all the conferences, getting more complex press. Again, substantial, huge articles in Mother Jones, in Roll Call. You can see those articles. You can go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, click on the main graphic, takes you right to the Congressional Hearing Initiative status page. Got big links to those articles, and people should go and look at them for themselves. It's been nothing like that previous, and it's just the beginning. PRG has got some funding. We hope to get more. Our publicist is working now full-time on this for us. Every venue in town is being approached. All the talk shows are going to be approached. We are on this, and the goal is quite simple. And, in fact, it's emerging very quickly. And Merle will appreciate this as a politician. Through strategy and the luck of circumstance, what has happened is that, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, I probably will be able to do so in a few weeks, but almost certainly what has happened is that we have created a situation where the White House is now the ambitions, the political ambitions of the Clintons to regain the White House, those ambitions, between the ambitions and the White House, stands the Truth and Rockefeller Initiative. And it's almost certain in my mind that there is no way that Secretary Clinton can get to the White House now without going through the Rockefeller Initiative, meaning she's going to have to answer a lot of questions about it, and that is going to metastasize very quickly to her husband, to Podesta, and so forth, and probably on the truth embargo. And by engaging it, I mean soon. It's almost impossible for me to imagine that Podesta and Secretary Clinton can dance around this and somehow avoid the press on this for 16 more months through the primaries, through the primary debates, and get the nomination, win the election, and enter the White House on January 20, and then deal, if she so desires, with the a disclosure issue and a truth embargo. It's just inconceivable at this point. And so John Podesta, and I'm very interested to know that you actually know him pretty well, Merle. He has never responded to me. I think he knows he probably can't. As you know, emails, everything is monitored by the NSA, and it would be very awkward for John to be, how would you say, in direct contact with me. You might be a different matter, but the equation that John Podesta now has to solve, and it is a tough one. I mean, we're talking historical, macroscopically important political equation, and we've seen this in the past. And the equation is this. If Secretary Clinton cannot make it to the White House without engaging the Rockefeller Initiative, and thus having her chance to be the disclosure president, as well as the 69th female to be the head of state of a country, if she can't do that, what do we do? What's the other option? What's plan B? And there isn't really a plan B other than this. They embrace it. They take it on head on. They do not try to dance at all, and they start answering questions about this of the press when they show up. If they do that, then it's highly likely that the truth embargo will end quickly. The Pentagon and the president will cut a deal. He'll make the announcement, and Obama will be the disclosure president. But the Democratic Party will be the disclosure party, which certainly benefits the Clintons. And the Clintons, because of all their past statements, because of what Podesta has done, will be grandfathered into that legacy and get a nice piece of it. And it's possible that this extraordinary act of truth-telling and honesty will reflect well on her, and she may very well win the presidency and would become the first full-time, full-term post-disclosure president. Or it may be blow up in their face, and it'll all be ridiculed, and her campaign will be undermined, and she might lose because of that maneuver. This is the equation that Podesta is trying to solve, I believe. The reason that Bill Clinton was on Jimmy Kimmel on April the 2nd, the reason Obama turned up on March the 13th, the reason he made that tweet is that you can see them working it, and you can see them taking some measures to insulate themselves or soften the problem for themselves should it go their way without actually triggering a major change. But this is a high-level political decision-making going on, and this is what the movement's been aiming for decades. We finally have a situation where this issue and the presidential ambitions of a very powerful person have come together and cannot be separated. And so I think Merrill will appreciate this. Oftentimes, it's this kind of situation that does create a major event in the life of a country.
Congressman, go ahead.
Let me just say that I think Stephen has analyzed that politically extremely well. I think that's a very sophisticated analysis, and I commend you for it. I know you're good at politics. I wish I were as good at understanding some of the political ramifications of things as you clearly just expressed. Because I did watch at least two of the three of those interviews on television, and I had the same thoughts, Stephen, that you expressed here. And I think you were very articulate in the way you explained all that, and I couldn't agree more. And I also just want to take this chance to say how honored I am that I was invited to be on this on the Saturday disclosure panel, which I think you're right could be one of the highlights of this, or at least a summation sort of thing of a very impressive many people that are scientists are going to be there at the contact event. So
you can expect to be very well received, Merrill.
And I'm delighted to participate.
Mm-hmm. You will be very well received by the audience. You're going to have a good time and bask in a little appreciation, which you well deserve. The other thing I would...
I do want to thank you for the opportunity just to be there with, especially with Stephen, and also you, Dr. J. I'm glad you're going to be there on that panel as well.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd like to mention now that I think is very important, if I was in a room, in a private discussion with John Podesta, what I would tell him.
And by the way, I'm going to tell you that he owes me. And he
Well,
that he owes me. I'm going to be delighted to speak with him. I have an opportunity. I know he will talk to me if I call him, because I helped him with some very serious things the Clinton administration was trying to do related to the transportation iced tea legislation that was reauthorizing transportation all across this country in every venue for 5 years. And he told me at the end of as this was coming together that he owed me, and I will call in that shit here for this purpose, Stephen.
Merle, be discreet. Keep in mind, the man is sitting on a declared candidacy.
I've learned that lesson. I sometimes get out in front too much sometimes, but I've watched you operate, Stephen, and you've done more to help this movement than anybody by that discreet way you handle things. So I've learned from you.
What I was going to say was this. What I would say to John Podesta is that I am not, the goal of this is not, I am an independent, registered independent. I'm a basically nonpartisan political truth advocate is what I am. And the goal of PRG is not to damage the campaign or the aspirations of Mrs. Clinton. It's not to cause problems for the Democratic Party. The fact is it was the Clinton administration that was approached by Lawrence Rockefeller. He had indicated to some of the people around him that he would have approached George H.W. Bush with the same proposals that he made in initiated on March 29, 1993, if he had won. But he didn't. As it happened, the person that won was a Democrat, and Lawrence was a supporter of the Democratic Party and knew the Clintons. So it was a more family affair. But it was the Clintons that were approached. That's just the way it was. That's fate. And they handled it for 3 years. Then they refused to speak about it. That was a choice that they made. And the people around them that knew about it remained major figures in the U.S. government and leadership. Again, that's the history of it. And so, by dint of this history, she is the one, wasn't her husband, he could have been, but he was blocked. And we want to know about that. We'd like to know how he was blocked. She is the one that is intersected with this issue at this time in history. And she is the one, Ann Podesta, her campaign chairman, who is going to have to deal with it. It is her call. She can try to avoid it and still make the White House and maybe disclose or not disclose. She can engage it. But the forces that are now pressing on this are so great that this is not a decision that they can simply kick down the road. And so that is why it's happening. My intention is not malevolent, I can assure you. If this was a Republican in the exact same position, I can assure you we would be pursuing it with just as much intensity. But it's not. And more importantly, the Clintons have this history. Podesta has this history of calling for the release of files, of writing a foreword to Leslie Gaines' book on generals and pilots speak out on this issue. He was involved in a documentary. Bill Richardson, close friend of them, challenged the explanation of Roswell. This is all there. Now, there may be a political strategy behind all this. Maybe they've always been looking ahead, that when there were perfect time and the right person, they would disclose this Democratic president. We no longer have the luxury of that. The truth embargo and Trump's political ambitions now. We must get disclosure. We need to get it as soon as possible. They have the power to trigger this by simply becoming forward on the issue. So that is what I would say to John Podesta. But I would also listen to his thoughts and so forth. Again, I understand the forces and the pressures here, but I think what has not happened to any of the presidents and presidential candidates is they've never been able to sit down with somebody who can truly present to them the reasons why the truth embargo has to end and why it transcends politics. They mostly have advisors that are basically echo chambers for their fundamental aspirations. And so they really haven't had it presented to them. And I think these are good people, they're intelligent people, and presented in the right way, I think they might get it. And so my hope is that this year the Democratic Party will end two embargoes. They ended the Cuba embargo earlier this year, about 20 years late, should have ended in 1992, 93. And I think the truth embargo and the ET issue could end this year almost exactly as late. It's about 22 years. Both of them should have ended back in the mid-90s, but hopefully both of them will in fact end this year. Embargoes, by and large, are not good diplomacy and not good politics, and the truth embargo and ET issue is really become a liability.
We got a little over 15 minutes before this first hour ends, where sadly Congressman Cook has to go. I'm going to ask you, Congressman, two questions, and then I want to turn it over to Mr. Bassett to ask you the remaining questions until this hour is over. First, being on, I'm very thankful and happy that you are just such a good, moral, humble man that wasn't corrupted by politics and advocating for this disclosure. So the main thing I'm going to ask you is, what are the colleagues that you have that are still in politics saying when this issue comes up? And the second thing, for any politicians who may be out there listening to this right now, who are closeted believers but don't want to openly talk about this, what would you say to them?
Well, I have to agree with Stephen's comments about at least half are not only open to this, but believe that there has been a definite cover-up. There is an embargo going on the truth of what the government knows, what the Air Force knows, and I'm thinking of two colleagues, by the way, that although I talked to them about different subjects this week that I was visiting with them on, really have talked to me in the past about this whole issue, and I'm thinking you might know Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina, a wonderful man, a guy, a real stand-up guy that has taken on a lot of issues. It shows courage, especially coming out against the war when the main Army base is right in his district there in North Carolina, and also. You might know Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, who's also on the Democratic side, that's talked to me about her beliefs in UFO, ufology, and so forth, that are very similar to mine, actually. And so, I can't say that I've talked to a whole lot of colleagues about these things, and therefore can't really totally tell you with assurance what they might think, but the ones that are stand-up people that will sometimes stand up against the grain, sometimes stand up against their own partisan whip, and vote their conscience or vote their constituents, are the ones that are more likely to want to support legislation or anything else that would end the truth embargo. So, I'm actually optimistic that you get that we're kind of at a tipping point here. And that depending on what happens in this presidential race, depending on what happens as far as the pressures that brought to bear on some of these candidates and so forth, that there could be some real movement in 2016, or maybe this year too, I hope. But I'm optimistic. I don't think there's that many that are so dead against, so established in this kind of thinking that caused for example, Project Blue Book to be overthrown some few decades back. I actually am quite optimistic that a little bit of leadership on the part of some senior and more powerful members of the Congress could really change this whole thing very quickly, and especially if there was a little bit of a nod from the White House or from significant chiefs of staff of who likely will be serving as the next president. And I think Obama was, when I saw his interview, I almost felt we were at a tipping point there. But then you could see how he backed off right at the moment, I don't get it. I don't understand why the National Science Foundation put the kibosh on Blue Book in the first place. Steve probably knows a lot more about that than I do, but no, I'm optimistic that there might be some change in the next year or two. And certainly what you're all doing with the contact and all these other things, and especially, I've got to say again, the systematic approach that PRG is using under Steve Bassett's leadership is the thing that's going to break this hole into the government and get some action. And I can't stress enough the importance of Steve working in an area that doesn't get all the great publicity sometimes, but is so clear in what he's trying to do as he goes around the globe and as he's continued this fight. The respect I've developed for you, Stephen, is not, I'm not just saying this because you're on the program here, but I think it's your approach that's going to really break this thing wide open.
I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Bassett, to ask him, but I just got one tweet to Congressman. This is actually a request. You've already inferred this is what you're going to do, but again, they just sent and they were listening the entire time. It says, this is from Lou Sheehan. I want Congressman Cook to commit to calling and meeting Podesta. Please ask him to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very happy to do that. I will be discreet, Steve. I think Stephen seems a little worried that I might say something.
No, I'm reluctant to throw any names out because what happens is, well, let me back up a second. Look, you're absolutely right. There are many instances where members of the House or Senate have taken some difficult stances on some issues that probably did not serve their political prospects well. We do see this. So they're able to do that. But understand, there is no issue that the members of the House and Senate are looking at like this one. Meaning there is no issue that where the government has for 70 years worked to undermine at its base level, to diminish, to demean, to disinform, and to create literally an intellectual ghetto around. And so while, there are issues that are challenging and risky to a member, none of them rise to the level of the ET issue. And so that is why, with a few exceptions, one being Congressman Stephen Schiff, another being Senator Claiborne Pell, though he worked pretty much in the background, no one has been willing to stand up to this one. I get it. Right? What they may not know is how far this issue has gone, how much support it has now in the general public, and the risk is probably not as great as they think. But this is the most classified issue in the United States government. It is easily the most controversial issue, and from a political standpoint, so political, so hot, that you don't even touch it, right? So I appreciate that. Now, that's going to change pretty soon, and I anticipate that something is going to happen behind the scenes. We're going to see some meetings and so forth. And until then, I'm going to continue to meet with staffers on both the House and Senate side, trying to develop the necessary input and consensus that will ultimately lead to meetings with the committee staff and thus the creation and agreement on a hearing. I am moving. That's a slow process, whereas the mainstream media process is much faster, meaning the media bites down on something, things can move very quickly. And right now, they're very close to biting down on the Rockefeller Initiative because of this extremely intense political situation we have, where the new presidential campaign is already underway with 4 or 5 candidates committed already, and possibly as many as 20 will sign up on the Republican side. We've got 2 or 3 on the Democratic side, a couple more. It's 16 months out. The election is scheduled to be maybe $4 billion. The Clinton campaign has already indicated they're going to try to raise $2.5 billion. When you get this kind of money at stake, when you have this many candidates, this is going to be an intense situation, and a major issue like the Rockefeller Initiative, the idea that it's somehow going to be orphaned again, not likely. And so some very hard decisions have to be made. So, Meryl, the one question I would ask you, and I'm going to ask you this again when it'll be the first question you get at the panel, in Joshua Tree at the Contact in the Desert. Describe, if you would, your frame of mind regarding the ET issue, going in, just going into the citizen hearing on disclosure, and compare it to your frame of mind after the 5 days was over.
Yeah, there was admittedly a sea change. It's not as though I was closed-minded against the ET aspect of ufology. It's that I think particularly, I'm trying to remember the names for sure, but Mr. Silas, the missile launch officer up in Montana or North Dakota.
Captain Bob Salas.
Yes, that's right. And then the Peruvian Air Force pilot that testified there. Hey, that some of those testimonies were so compelling to me, and also the Rendlesham Forest thing that I, of course, took a role in getting letters to the Veterans Administration for those two Air Force heroes, in my opinion. And I've been in touch with them since, by the way, Stephen. And so, to answer your question more succinctly, is a total difference in having. It's not that I was against extraterrestrial explanations, because I wasn't. But I was looking, but I didn't think I really had any evidence or any real sense of it until some of that testimony. And as you know, when I was interviewed by the New York Times, I told them how compelling that was and how it did change my mind. And I'm glad you pointed out that my mind did. I'm not saying it changed, it progressed in understanding and perhaps knowledge, this whole area. And I also want to say, Stephen, that as I committed to this person who called or texted to contact some of this, I will not do that without talking to you personally to know how I can do this in a way that fits what you think would work and be discreet and work in tandem, hand in glove with what you're trying to do. So don't think I'm going to go off to saying something indiscreet to John Podesta just because I've agreed to go contact him. He does.
Not indiscreet to John, but rather once you start to make contact, it's important that media do not know about it, that it's relatively private. That's it. No, feel free to move ahead on your own. You can easily handle it.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I still want to talk to you before I actually talk to him.
Sure.
So that we can coordinate appropriately and properly, and so that I don't want to cause, as you say, some media leak that hurts the movement. So I'm going to make a point to be in touch with you, Stephen, before I talk to him. But when I say he owes me, what he owes me is a chance to really talk to him about this. You know what I mean? Because I did help them in some important votes and rallies on the Transportation Committee with that ICT legislation they were so vitally interested in at the time.
Well, I share your view that he's a very honorable man. He's a brilliant man. He's the smartest man in the room. He's been at the center of Democratic politics now for quite a long time. He's and I have a hunch when all this is said and done, he will be the linchpin individual. But we'll see. We'll see.
I think you're right. I think you're assessing that correctly.
All right. So, yeah, I think the other members that I've talked to had similar experiences. They came in as modestly informed neutrals on the issue of the ET. Open minds, modestly informed, didn't know too much, and neutral on the issue. But at the end of the 5 days, they felt substantially informed, and they were no longer neutral. At minimum, they were convinced that hearings should take place.
Right.
And at maximum, they were pretty much convinced that the ET issue was real and that the extraterrestrial presence was, in fact, an established reality. Now, another question for you, Merle. One of the, hearings are interesting things on Capitol Hill. they're easy to do, and they can be called like that and put together in a few days if they so desire. They can be political or very bipartisan, but at their core, it's just individuals sitting and listening to people providing expert testimony for their consideration, and they're doing it collectively. And so as things go on the Hill, a hearing, as compared to a bill, my God, is easy to do, and the political risk is not that great, which is one of the reasons why I think the congressional hearing approach clearly has a chance to make substantial progress. Am I correct in that? I mean, do you see it similar?
You're totally correct in that. Hearings are significant, important, but it's relatively easy to do. It's not like doing a markup on a bill, where actually you need a whole bunch of different hearings before you can even begin on something like that. So, no, you're exactly right. There should be no reason why we can't get some hearings that would result in some legislation that would help this whole area of disclosure. And the hearings should be easy. They shouldn't be that hard. And if there's anything I could do to talk to some of the colleagues that I used to know and that might have influence there, and some of them really do now, I would be happy to take that on if you could direct me, Steve, in any way that you think might be useful.
Certainly. Yes, I mean, and one of the reasons why
it's a nice thing to be able to arrange these things. Go ahead.
Again, one of the reasons why we're making this progress is the citizen hearing on disclosure. Because what happened there is that we had a mock hearing. We had former members ask questions, listen to the testimony. There was an audience and so forth, and it went very well, and it was very well done and professional. And so then we have the record of it so that any member or staffer can watch some of this and pretty much see how a real hearing would go. And what they will see is by and large, the political risk is minimal. I mean, without that model, without that example, they could concoct in their mind all kinds of, risk scenarios that would just scare them. But we've taken that risk out by doing that event and providing them that example. So, again, what you accomplished there in that hearing is critical to ultimately, I think, getting the hearings that we need to have as soon as we need to have them. We need to have them soon. These hearings got to take place before the heated part of the campaigns begin next year. They need to get on board. And one of the things I tell Congress, Merrill, is this, that, Congress has been completely out of this for 47 years.
Right.
And meanwhile, a lot has been happening. And if this thing breaks, I mean, Congress will be irrelevant. I mean, there's nothing there. People will say, where have you been? And so Congress has an opportunity to get involved here and at least show a willingness to look at it and take it seriously, which I think is essential if Congress is going to help regain the confidence of the American people in its willingness to find and seek truth and to serve the American people. This is the biggest issue in the world today, and they basically have done zero for 47 years. And this is the first chance they've had, really, to do something profound here and get involved. So I give that message to the staffers. I want Congress to get involved. I want them to benefit from this process because I don't like seeing Congress with approval ratings of 12 and 13%.
That's right, and they've been totally AWOL, as you said, for over 40 years. I think they have realized that it's probably a risk much greater. It is definitely a much greater risk to do nothing than to have some hearings, starting right, I think, with the Space Committee, I would think. So
I agree.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, Stephen.
So these are the kinds of things that are in play and in discussions, and we'll talk. I'll get in touch with you very quickly before contact in the desert. I'm going to send you an email with a number of thoughts, and we can start to coordinate a little bit more. I've got till the 26th. I'm leaving on the 26th. I've got 12 days to whip up some more hearings. I'm going to be working on that, get a few more offices involved here. and then we can also talk some more at Contact in the Desert. I'll be back from Contact on the June the 6th and really get down to business with the idea of trying to get a breakthrough either in June or early July. So again, I'm looking out 60 days. My intention is I have no desire to wait until the election or even get close to the next election. I would like to see commitments on hearings and possibly a media breakthrough within the next 60 days, which, if they were to happen, I believe the pressure on the president and the Pentagon will be so great, anticipating a media blowout, that they would have to cut the deal that's been called for all along, wherein the president gives the Pentagon the necessary assurances the Pentagon needs as to how the president plans to deal with the post-disclosure world, the day after disclosure, the week, the month, the year after, because the Pentagon has got a lot of concerns there, and the president gets the assurance that the Pentagon is going to back him up. Once that deal is struck, there is no barrier to the president disclosing. It could happen very, very fast. And so I'm looking for disclosure in July, in this August, and that would be best before this very complex campaign gets underway. And Lord knows how everybody gets tangled up with the political nest, political webs that are going to be weaved. Let's get this out of the way, serve the American people, and they can all campaign in the post-disclosure world. And I guarantee you, Merrill, that's going to be one interesting campaign.
For sure. Well, I think I'm glad you've got that kind of a timeline here, and I just want you to know I stand ready to help any way I can. I want to thank Dr. J for this opportunity to be on for this hour.
Of course.
And
thank you.
In a few weeks here. So thank you very much.
Before we go to break, Congressman, do you have any final words for anybody out there listening?
Well, let me just say that I do think that this disclosure is kind of a bedrock. It's maybe sometimes more fun to talk about, what the latest sighting is, and that's critically important. And I even had a couple of things that I wanted to ask Stephen about. I'll certainly get a chance to ask him about that have happened in Utah since the hearings that I've been made aware of through some of the MUFON people. And I just want to say that this is the bedrock to unlock what's in files, the United States government, because as you said, things that might become very apparent in 20 years might already be in files from 30 and 40 years ago, if not before. And by the way, I don't know if let me just mention this to Stephen here at the end, but I had the chance to fly home with the young, well, of course now he's even older than I am, but the young boy who there on his kitchen floor in Roswell, New Mexico, with his father, pieced together pieces of that very unusual material that clearly came from some kind of an extraterrestrial.
Jesse Marcel Jr.
Yeah, and I forget his name, but what a wonderful man. And knowing that, let's see, 1947, I believe, we got the date right again. And to fly home with him and his sister to Los Angeles with my dear wife Camille at the time, who's since passed, but was just a wonderful experience to see the integrity, the honesty of that man, and to talk about his father, who was, that whole incident was very well documented at the hearings, and of course many books have been written, and I've read some of those books, and I was so pleased to get to know firsthand witnesses to Roswell that the Secretary Richards says that still to this day, and certainly when he was governor of New Mexico, was trying to uncover and met the same embargo problems that Steve is fighting so valiantly against.
So you were sitting near Jesse on the plane going back from the citizen hearing?
Oh, we flew home together. We saw each other at the airport there in Washington, and in fact he came up to me as I was asking for some special accommodations to help my wife get on the plane and so forth. And we were able to arrange to sit together as we came
fantastic.
home.
Jesse, Jesse passed about 7 months ago.
His name for a bit there, but yes, that's who it was, right?
And his family said that that citizen hearing was the highlight of his in terms of this issue. It was the highlight of his life because he finally had a chance to speak with people like you and get it fully on the record, and was very much at peace. And I know that his chat with you in that plane ride going home must have been fantastic. And
it really was. And what a gentleman! What a great guy! I mean,
he's a great American.
And I thought his appearance at the hearing was so not only just so interesting, but even emotional. I mean, I was even emotionally affected by him and his sister, who testified about their father and the things they said about him were just so meaningful to me. It's just an emotional feeling that I had. Almost brought me to tears, actually, as I listened to him. But I really
great American.
know him even better. Yeah, absolutely great American. You bet.
Well, we are absolutely honored to
opportunity, Dr. J, and what an honor to be on with Steve, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
And we'll definitely have to do this again. Congressman Cook, thank you for joining us. Everybody stay tuned. Much more with Stephen Bassett when we return from this quick break.
Okay.
Welcome back to Hour 2 of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, you had a fascinating hour with both Congressman Merrill Cook and Stephen Bassett. So much more with Stephen Bassett on disclosure this hour. Real quick, I just want to say my co-host this hour, Johnny Webb, live in London, will be joining us, and he hasn't had a chance to say anything, so I want to introduce him into the show. Johnny, welcome into the show.
Good evening, Dr. J. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can. Now, before we proceed, I just want to tell everybody that the Michael Tellinger video is up, the interview that you guys sadly didn't get to hear, but we made it onto YouTube. All you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com and hit the YouTube link. Last week's shows are both up, except for John Anthony West is still being worked on, but Kathleen Martin, Nick Redfern, and every other recent show has been posted, as well as the last year's interview from Linda Moulton Howe going into Contact in the Desert. And speaking of Contact in the Desert, tonight is the last night for you to enter to win tickets. So far, 21 winners have been announced via my contest. And if you want to see the names, all you have to do is go to my website, drjradiolive.com, and just click on the Contact in the Desert link, and you will see every single name. 3 more tickets will be drawn tomorrow, and I will be announcing those names on Tuesday's show. And all you have to do is go to contactinthedesert.com/DRJ. Again, contactinthedesert.com/DRJ. Now let's turn back to our guest, Mr. Bassett. Before I have more questions for you, I want to ask you, what's new for you? Where can people find you? Where can people find the information on what's happening to end the truth embargo, as well as you're going to be speaking and having the workshop and the lecture at Contact in the Desert, and of course the big disclosure panel, which I think is going to be the highlight. Any other appearances beyond that?
Well, I am going to be speaking at the Laughlin Conference, which is in November, in Laughlin, Nevada. That's a pretty big event as well, and so I invite people to come to that. I'm trying to pull up the dates right now. It shouldn't be a problem. And that is in November. That's the only other one I think is scheduled. Yeah, November 13th to 15th, Laughlin at the Aquarius Hotel. That's put on by Starrix USA. It's going to be quite a few to speak. Some of the citizen hearing people will be there. That's in November, and then I am speaking at Contact in the Desert. Nothing else scheduled between those two because, again, the emphasis is going to be on the Congressional Hearing Initiative, which is going to take up more and more of my time. as I meet with more and more of the offices, more and more of the staffers.
And having
July and August.
Exactly, and hopefully ending this truth embargo, as you said, this summer. Preferably, it would be nice to end it 60 years to the day of Roswell in early July. I got to say, the reason I latched onto you so much is because 3 years ago at the Conscious Life Expo, just before that, of course, there was the famous petition that you had, and which reached the threshold of 5,000 signatures by having, I believe, 12,000. And of course, the White House gave the generic response. And then I saw your lecture, and I thought it was just a fantastic way to approach. And that's why I've thought it was so important to push anything you had to get it out there through any media connections I have via YouTube and, of course, the radio, because the approaches you've used and putting the citizen hearing, you heard it from Congressman Cook himself. It was the best thing that he had been put together for this topic. And to me, paying attention to ufology since 1984, this was the best ever of anything that we could have done to put it out in the public and to wake up the politicians. And that's why I truly commend you and am willing to continue to do anything needed to push the work out there. Now, speaking of the petitions, they raised the threshold after that first one with a low-level staffer responded to 25,000. When you had another petition, which seemed that we might have been breaking that number, what did they do? They bumped it to 100,000. It seems to me that they're not bumping the number of signatures needed for any other reason except the petitions you've been pushing.
Well, that's a little generous. There were several reasons they were bumping the petitions up. I think the first bump might have been connected to the success of the disclosure petition because, I mean, somebody read, oh, God, look what just came in the door here. But there was other reasons. They had underestimated the thirst that people had developed to be able to engage the government in a direct way and maybe get a response from the White House. I mean, it was a good idea. We the People was a pretty cool idea. And they were getting thousands of petitions. Now, many of them did not get the 150 signatures required to be published, but they saw where this was going. They realized that if they didn't raise the threshold, they were going to be up to their eyeballs in petitions that theoretically the president might have to respond to. So that was also the case. But what's important is that we got 5 more petitions in after November 4 of 2011, which were up for 30 days each. And all of those petitions were pointing to evidence in one way or another that the White House had stated in their November 4th response didn't exist at all. So that was very helpful, and that We the People project is still going on. And of course, the original petition, the first one, Disclosure Petition 1, and the response is still on the White House website 4 years later. So I'll give them credit. They haven't pulled it down. There it is for all to see. And of course, the whole history of the petitions can be found at disclosurepetition.org, disclosurepetition.org, and you can see them all, as well as the link over to the White House response and the original petition. So, yeah, look, the fact is, we've been at this for a long time. The citizen science movement's been going on for 70 years. The activist movement is really more like 20 years old, though there was some efforts prior to 92. And the fact is, we've had it, and we finally got an opening. You know what I mean? It's like you're playing football, and you keep running into the line, and then you get an opening. You get a shot, and you break through, and you score a touchdown, win the game. That opening came in September of 2011, and to be fair to the Obama administration, they're the ones that handed it. They're the ones that created that opening. They're the ones that set up the program, We the People, and set up the petition program. And we just took advantage of it. And that then moved into the Congressional Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, which then made possible the Congressional Hearing Initiative. So we got the opening, and we've been running down the field ever since, looking to cross the goal line. And I'm hoping that goal line is going to be crossed this summer. I'm serious about this now. I'm not fooling around. I can't predict with certainty when disclosure is going to happen, and never have done that. But I've never seen an opportunity like this. If I can keep the pressure on by continuing the meetings on the Hill with staffers regarding congressional hearings, which is a private process. It's not, it's not being publicized other than I'm up there. I'm not giving out names of staffers or any of that. It's just privately going on. And at the same time, we continue to push the mainstream media. And these two are kind of feeding each other. The political reality of the Clintons is that she, the declared candidate and the absolute leading candidate to be president, is not going to be able to get away from the Rockefeller Initiative. She's going to have to confront it. And that's why we're trying to raise some more money. We need another $20,000, $30,000 to ensure that I can continue to operate and do everything necessary in Washington, where I'm set up temporarily, and pursue this congressional hearing and this media with our publicist to the maximum. So we're trying to do that, but we have this opening. If, the Clinton campaign got contacted by Mother Jones magazine, which is a pretty well-known magazine, regarding the Rockefeller Initiative. Now, they blew the question off, okay? Mm-hmm. Obama got asked about the ET issue deliberately, intentionally, and he danced around it. Again, you see, they're having to deal with it. It's not something that they know they can run from anymore. And it will only take one serious journalist, high level, that confronts Mrs. Clinton on this. And if that happens, she is in almost an impossible situation. If she refuses to answer the question, 10 more journalists will turn up the next day. If she lies about it, she's in deep trouble because the documents confirming the Rockefeller Initiative were obtained by Grant Cameron 14 years ago. They've been up the web for 13 years. Anybody can go to the Internet, either to Grant's site, presidentialufo.com, or to my site, paradigmresearchgroup.org, and they can see these documents, which confirm the initiative that went on for 3 years, confirm her involvement. And so if she lies about it, she's dead to rights. And so the moment that happens, and I know that they're planning for it, I know that they're thinking ahead, she has got to decide, do I go ahead and take this on, or do I somehow think I can dance my way through this for 16 months? I got to believe she's too smart, and Podesta's too smart to think otherwise. And so my guess is she's going to answer that question. And the moment she says, yes, we did try to get the files released, we did make an effort for 3 years. Lawrence Rockefeller was the progenitor of that effort. We were blocked. We could get no information. We're not happy about that. My campaign chairman has called for the release of files 2 times since, and so forth. The moment she gives that answer, the media is going to go ballistic. And that is the ball game. And that's how close we are, right? For those that are still doubters out there, right, understand that the political ambitions of the Clintons is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. And right now, those ambitions are blocked by the Rockefeller Initiative and the truth embargo, blocking them between them and the White House. That's a situation where things start happening.
I believe you're absolutely right. If Hillary actually says, yes, we were tried and we were blocked, it was the most progress that we could have seen in the last several years. Now, I have several more things I want to ask you, but we do have a caller, I believe. I think I know this caller. It's Lou Sheehan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right.
Yep. Do you have any questions for Mr. Bassett?
I do, too. The least important, pardon me, I have a cough, is a reference to the Mother Jones article, so I and others can try and find that. But also, I'm curious, have you considered, kind of like Grant Cameron did with his phone call to former Vice President Cheney, and I believe James Fox did with President Carter, have you considered going to town hall meetings where you're more able to approach the candidates directly and ask some pointed questions or whatever type of questions are You think would be helpful in getting them on the record there?
Well, the answer to that is I'm actually up on the Hill, Capitol Hill, talking with congressional staff, which is much further along. And I know that there are others out there that can pop those questions when the opportunity arises. And it doesn't arise very often, and it's somewhat fleeting. I'm glad they're doing it. It keeps them on their toes. But I'm in the middle of it here. I'm in the thick of it.
Okay.
And the idea is to get the Congress motivated right now. We know where the president stands, at least publicly. And it's very easy for them to simply deflect. But what we're doing, when you see Bill Clinton on the Kimmel Show, when you see Barack Obama on the Kimmel Show, that is telling you that we're really actually moving them around. So trust me, we're on this. And but anybody wants to toss a question at them when they turn up in any of these venues, I hope they do. It just lets them know we're not going anywhere.
On record, of course. We definitely would like that videotape. That way we catch them on record. I asked the Los Angeles mayor when he was elected, when I ran into him at the Los Angeles Greek Festival, and of course he just blew it off. But I got him on record, that's the important part. Lou, do you have any other questions before I...
Well, he had one other question.
The Mother Jones article.
Yeah, if you do a Mother Jones UFO search, you'll get it. Or if you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, and then just punch through the main graphic, you'll get to the status page, and it's got the links to everything.
Great, super. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. J.
Thank you, Lou, for calling. Okay, I'm really glad, Mr. Bassett, you brought up the fact that if Hillary says and just denies it, then 10 more journalists will start asking. And this goes back to when I first heard that amazing lecture of the strategy that the media does not like being lied to, going back to the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal where I did not have sexual relations, and referring also to when JFK was sleeping with virtually any woman in the office, but the media kept quiet because he was honest to them. And I really love that.
Well, that was the protocol then. You didn't really talk about that. You didn't ask, and he didn't answer, and there was an understanding, okay? However, the Clinton situation was much more volatile, much more blatant, and in the Oval Office, and it was a different time. And so and Bill had always been a huge admirer of JFK. He modeled himself after JFK. He looked up to him, and he was trying to be like JFK, only it was a different time. And so when it finally came down to the nitty-gritty, he thought, maybe I can pull this off. And he went out, and he made a statement that virtually no member of the press in Washington believed, and that pretty much was the ball game. But the ball game really didn't go until the blue dress turned up, but something else would have happened. So, Hillary Clinton is smart, and I just don't think she is going to make that same mistake. She cannot afford to pull the equivalent of I didn't have sex with that woman on the Rockefeller Initiative issue. Because, one of the reasons that Clinton did that is there were people around him advising him that, look, having sex with somebody is not that big a deal. It's your personal life. It's not about foreign policy. It's not about domestic policy. And it's really none of their damn business. The Rockefeller Initiative is 1 billion times more important than the sex life of the president. And to try to pull that with this would be a huge mistake. She has only been able to get away with this because nobody in the press has ever asked her a question about it until A.J. Vicens and Mother Jones submitted that question to her campaign. And, of course, that's just the beginning.
One thing I really like is when you started the media blitz, the hashtag disclosure has I remember at least a while back, it was well over 1 million times. And every time we tweet out a message regarding a show, or we pump that out there too as well, and everybody retweets it. The same thing with Podesta's tweet, the hashtag, the truth is still out there. That, too, is definitely in the 7 figures of how many times people used it. So clearly, as you said, there's so much interest within those politicians, and that I just really hope we break them. Now, sadly, as you know, Michael Dukakis did come on the show, but I couldn't quite break him. He wouldn't want to talk about the issue. without mentioning any names, for all the staffers you've been speaking to, how's the feedback with regards to the videos of the citizen hearing? Because the hearing itself, as we've been speaking about, was the pivotal event with the top witnesses and researchers that literally changed the lives of everybody who was present and everybody who viewed it.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that. Before I do, I got to tell you, Podesta could have simply used the word disclosure. He could have said, my biggest regret for 2014 was once again not getting disclosure, just the word, of the UFO files. Using hashtag disclosure. Because remember, and believe me, we generated 1.5 million or 1.3 million or some messages. You trust me. He saw some of those. There's no way he did not see them. And so, to me, by using hashtag disclosure, that was a direct message to the movement. I am paying attention. I'm going to be the chairman of possibly the next president's campaign, and I can't go beyond this, but this is my way of sort of letting you know we are paying attention. I pay attention to that kind of stuff. That's very, very significant. Again, there is right now, I think, some very significant political equations being looked at, discussed behind the scenes, behind the press, within the Democratic hierarchy as they confront what to do. Take it on, get Barack the disclosure legacy, which would be massive, and anticipate that it will carry over and possibly help them win the White House in 2016, or stonewall this somehow and get to 2016 and then win the election, and then of course Hillary Clinton could be the disclosure president. These are things they're thinking about, but of course, this is not easy. But I think we've got them thinking that way, and once they get going down that road, I think the outcome is obvious. Now, with respect to the members on the Hill, look, nobody's giving me any grief up there. Trust me, nobody. And I've had very good responses and good discussions. It is a slow process. You start with a staffer, sometimes a top staffer, but then you also want to meet with a legislative liaison. That's the person that's the liaison between the member's office and the committee staff, which has its own separate staff. You work that, and then eventually you hope to meet with maybe the chief of staff. They may switch. You may get a chance to meet with some of the committee staffers, and then at some point the member will step in. This is not a process that you jam. You just don't go up there and boogaloo up and down the halls and make this happen. But the fact that it's underway, and I can say it's underway, is very, very important. So, and it's also something that starts off very slow, and then all of a sudden you get a significant media breakthrough, and it just picks up speed. Right? Boom, 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 and things can move very quickly. For instance, there have been cases like the Benghazi situation. When the Benghazi thing started heating up, they started calling hearings one after another, and they can throw them together in a couple of days. And they have subpoena power and do everything they want. So it's a slow process, but as long as you keep moving it, at some point you break through. So right now I'm very pleased with where things are. Sure, I'd like to be even further along, but given where we've been in the past, and so forth. And then the timing. The timing could not be better. We have a campaign for president that's starting unbelievably early, and you got already candidates committed, which means now they simply can't run away from the press. Though, interestingly enough, notable, Secretary Clinton has not talked to the press in 24 days, which I find very interesting. Right? Obama went on the Kimmel Show on it was March the 13th. The Mother Jones article came on April the 3rd, which really had to raise some red flags. And then since about April 20, she's not talked to the press. So I find that very interesting. All right. So, so you've got that campaign. She's already announced, but more importantly, that the Republicans may have in pretty soon as many as 15 to 20 declared candidates. This is not like 2008, when the other candidate was obviously going to be John McCain, a kind of old war horse, with, I think, a relatively moral center, who was smart enough to know that the ET issue is not something you're going to get into with respect to your opponent. Now she's looking at potentially 15 to 20 Republican opponents who are all over the map in terms of background, history, philosophy, and everything else. And quite a few of them, I think it's quite clear that they would not hesitate to use the ET UFO issue against her, which has been out there for a long time, and beat her over the head with it. And so this idea that somehow she can just skate through all of this and pretend the extraterrestrial issue doesn't even exist is simply not feasible anymore. So once again, the timing, the circumstances are nearly perfect. It's a perfect storm, John, I swear to God.
I agree. Go ahead, Johnny.
Sorry, Dr. J. It's Johnny Webb in London, and good evening to you, Stephen. I've got a couple of questions for you. You mentioned earlier Stephen Schiff, and I wonder if you could tell us a story about Stephen Schiff and what he managed to find out, or what he didn't manage to find out. And the other question I've got for you, what's the plans on the UK, or do you have any dealings with the UN regarding disclosure?
Okay, let me take the last one first. I may be speaking at the UN later this year, and I'm always aware of it, but it's very, very difficult tact. I don't see the UN being the breakout here. There's much more immediate opportunities. The UN is going to be a player after disclosure. I've been in the UK many times. I'm looking to go back. We got an exopolitics movement there. David Griffin is involved. You got Anthony Beckett, Miles
Johnson.
Miles Johnson. So there's a lot there. But there's only so much I can do. They're stirring the pot. But the UK government's pretty firm, not going anywhere on this issue. And then, I'm sorry. What was the first part of that question?
The first question was within the UK. What were the plans when you come here? The second one was
before that. There was something else.
It was about Stephen Schiff.
Stephen Schiff. Here's the thing. The Rockefeller Initiative began on March the 29th, 1993. That's when Henry Diamond sent the fax to the Office of Science and Technology Policy saying that Lawrence wanted to meet with Gibbons, wanted to get a letter to the president, wanted to pursue this issue and ultimately get the files released. And, of course, the Rockefeller Initiative began. Not too long after that is when Schiff, the Congressman from New Mexico, started to make inquiries about the Roswell files. Now, we don't know for sure if there's a connection there. I think there really must be a connection there. So you've got Lawrence wanting the government to release all the UFO files, and then after that's kind of underway for a while, Schiff starts inquiring about the Roswell files. Now, he had a basic motivation. He's a congressman from. He's also a Republican too, so he's not in the same party. He's also a congressman from New Mexico. So there was a logic that he might do this, but still, there have been plenty of Congress people from New Mexico that wouldn't touch it. So it's very possible that what was happening at the White House, which, Capitol Hill is a giant rumor mill, right? Really. You got 10,000 staffers up there. They're all eating lunch together. And believe me, nothing's happening without the rumors getting around. So it was known that there was something going on at the White House regarding the ET issue. And so I think that that helped motivate him to do it. So Schiff started making inquiries about the Roswell. Now, he's a former Army officer, as is his wife. So he's a serious guy. And he made inquiries of the GAO. Well, he started off with the Air Force, and they started bouncing him around. They did the classic refer to the next candidate, just kind of in a circle. And he got irritated. He's very irritated. They were obviously not seriously responding to his request, and they kept just passing him off to somebody else. And he went public. He went on television, Larry King for one, and I think a couple of others, and he voiced his irritation that he's not getting a straight response from the government on these records. And what transpired is that because he did that, I think it was the Air Force, it might have been the GAO, I think it was the Air Force, contacted him and said, we don't have those files because they were destroyed, which also pissed him off. Right? He didn't believe him. Right? But they had to respond. They were forced to respond because he went public. And so at that point, there's not much to do there, but people were learning about Schiff's activities, and of course it got picked up and it got a part of the advocacy dialogue and the movement. It was getting publicized because, we're entering the era of the internet, 95, right? And so Schiff's efforts got a lot more exposure than had he done in, say, 1985. And then, about not much later, he suddenly developed an unusual cancer of his ear. It was a squamous cancer that I've had squamous cancers removed, but this was some odd squamous cancer of the outside of his ear, and I think the earlobe or something, and they couldn't stop it. And it just drilled right through his ear into his brain, killed him. He died in office. And that's the story of Stephen Schiff. In one of my conferences, I gave him a posthumous award for political courage, and personally delivered that award to his widow in New Mexico. That was years and years ago.
We got a little about 15 minutes left before the end of the show, and of course we can go on for hours, but I wanted to gear the rest of the time to basically use this platform to say whatever you want. But I'm going to start with this question. Of course, I know what we need to do as hosts and part of media is to continue to push this, to continue to send out tweets and to reach out to every single member of the House and Congress and their staffers and just bombard them with the knowledge and then raising awareness to the public. But what can the listeners do directly to aid in your endeavors to end this truth embargo?
Well, we're not running an intensive social media campaign right now, but if they go to FAX on Washington.org, they can get the basic information for firing off some Facebook messages and Twitters to Capitol Hill, to as many of the members as they want, letting them know that they're still expecting them to take action, do hearings, look at the citizen hearing on disclosure, DVDs and so forth. That's helpful. There's also a Facebook page for people that are on Facebook group called the Disclosure Lobby. And they can go there and also get that information as well. And that's fine. I mean, the intensive campaign is kind of over, but it's nice to keep a little flow going in there. They can support the movement. They go to conferences and what have you. That's helpful. If they want to contact in a more aggressive way by phone and so forth, they're actual representatives in Congress. They're two senators and their congressperson. That's helpful, right? But just theirs. If you're not a constituent, they don't want to hear from you, at least in that kind of direct way. And let them know that they'd like to see action there, and let them know that there's a lobbyist, named Stephen Bassett that is meeting on the Hill and would be happy to talk with any member, though I'm focused on 93 right now, just the 5 committees that are fundamentally in play. Obviously, financial support is always needed. We never have enough. We don't need a great deal now. I think about another 25,000, 30,000 will guarantee an aggressive initiative through June, July, and into August without any trouble. That's kind of, I just can't understate that. I mean, you simply can't do this work with monopoly money. I mean, that's not the way it works. So we did get the funding for the citizen hearing on disclosure, and we spent it. And now we're driving the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Much less is needed to, I think, take this to the finish line. The big expense was the citizen hearing on disclosure. It cost $750,000, worth every penny. So that's really out of the way. Now we just need to keep the Congressional Hearing Initiative and the media campaign, our publicists, fully engaged. And then, other than that, you talk it up a little bit. You share links and things like that. That's about it. I mean, we don't have, there's not a movement here. We're not going to have million-person marches on Washington, or, it's just that the nature of this movement doesn't lend itself to that. People that are contactees that are coming out, that's helpful, but that's they should only do that if they can do it without creating real problems in their life. Certainly, any very famous people who feel they can do that and come forward, that's significant. It puts a lot of pressure on the truth embargo when very well-known people come forward and say, "Look, cut the crap. I've been dealing with Gray since I was 6, right? So let's get on with it," that kind of thing. So that's helpful. A lot of contactees are forming private groups, even CE5 groups and so forth. That's happening kind of behind the scenes. I don't think we know how many, but it's probably a lot larger than anybody knows. So there are various grassroots elements that are building. But ultimately, this is a issue that will be resolved at the top. Like the civil rights movement, ultimately there had to be an act of Congress that was passed. Actually, several. The first one was the Civil Rights Act. And with this movement, the only way to properly resolve it is the president has got to announce CET presence disclosure. And that is something that can be worked in Washington. The awareness of millions of people, which is clearly there, they know that. I mean, believe me, they follow the polls. They know that half the American people poll that they believe this is real. They know how many websites there are. They know how much activity and so forth. And they're not unaware of the popular engagement of this issue. They know the most popular genre in all of television and movies is the extraterrestrial genre. They know all of that. So they're not unaware that the public is already on the side of, telling us the truth. But they're locked into the truth embargo and not quite able to end it internally. But we're trying to create a situation where we solve the problem for them and open the can. Now, the press is going to be my can opener, and it's going to open a can of truth, which it does from time to time. I mean, a lot of times the press fails us. It does a terrible job. It screws it up or it doesn't cover. We get that. But from time to time, the press opens up the can, and out comes a lot of pretty important information. So this is going to be one of those times. Ultimately, I like where we're at, and as long as people keep paying attention, keeping a dialogue going, that helps, and that's enough. That's a lot.
I'm glad you mentioned famous names, because you're absolutely right. Every time someone famous, such as Tom DeLonge from Blink-182, or when I had the honor of interviewing Jack Osborne, son of Ozzy Osbourne, talking about his interest and his deep interest in abductions, and the rumor goes around that it's possibly his family may have been his sister in particular may have been a contactee. People absolutely tune in when they know their idols are paying attention. Now, when I was working with Third Phase of the Moon and hosting the radio, Whoopi Goldberg's people actually reached out to us and said that she wanted some more information and some access to some videos that weren't released and some opinions. Of course, she wouldn't go public about it, but that just proved to me that there's people out there, that celebrity status, that have so much influence, yet they're scared. And I don't know what it's going to take for us to get them to finally break, but we need it. Do you have...
it's not. We just do the best we can. They'll do what they're going to do when they can do it. It's exactly analogous to lesbian gays who, in Hollywood and entertainment and in politics, who did not dare come out on that issue because they felt it would damage their careers. It's exactly the same. Though, frankly, it's, well, let me put it this way. I think the risk is not as great, frankly, but nevertheless, it's perceived to be great because the government has run such an extensive campaign to marginalize and ghettoize the issue. So they've sort of created a more exaggerated sense of concern. But a lot of people, we got Thomas Jane, a pretty well-known actor. You got Ricky Williams. There's
Shirley
a number
MacLaine.
of well-known contactees, but and they're known. I'm talking a level or two above them. Right? That's where things get really interesting very quickly. You got your D list, your C list, your B list, and your A list, and that's true of not only entertainers, it's true of sports figures, and it's true of political figures. And military. So, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a former Secretary of Defense, one of the, a hugely well-known baseball player, a A-list, top of the A-list entertainer, could come out at any time, and that's going to be a serious problem with the truth embargo, and they really can't do much about it. They just can't. The ones that have come forward basically have not had a problem that I'm aware of. I know that Fran Drescher stepped out and then stepped back. I think she was a little worried. But overall, they can't stop it. And so, again, they're just dancing through the cemetery here. I mean, they're whistling by the graveyard. They got to know the truth embargo is really practically dead. It jumped the shark some time ago. And our job is to keep reminding them of that until they finally realize, there's only one thing left to do: tell the truth. It may just be very popular, and that's where they're getting close to. It's just really close. I mean, the only thing that would stop it, and they could really screw this up for a while, years even, which is one of the reasons why I continue to press for financial support from people who think, it's going to happen, no big deal, it's inevitable, is that we could have another 911 tomorrow. In fact, there are potentially much bigger things that could happen in 911 tomorrow. And if that takes place, you'll see a response that will be very disproportionate. All hell will break loose. And the ability to probably move the disclosure process forward will be shut down for years, possibly, while we go off and do God knows what. Economic collapses, more war, more terrorism. By the other hand, if we can get disclosure in July, it's done. You can't undisclose.
That's right.
Once it's done forever. And so it doesn't matter what happens after that or what gets blown up or who invades who. We are in the post-disclosure world. And so we need support to ensure that we get it done as soon as possible because the future is really dicey right now. I don't think anybody argues with that. And so you want to wait for another war? I mean, how many wars do you want to go through before you commit to, hey, let's end this? And this is true for those that are thinking of coming forward. It's also true for those who want to fund this. This is our chance. Let's get it done.
I'm glad you brought up 9/11 because that occurred not too long, I think within a matter of months after
4 months.
4 months after Dr. Greer's disclosure project at the National Press Club. And that was nowhere near as well put together of what you put together. But, it was literally a press conference. But it seemed to me that the 9/11 just fell in perfect timing to kind of put this away. Obviously, you said, it's just a given. We can't control if something like that happens or another national disaster, either man-made or natural, but we still have to keep on pushing through. Now, with regards to the petitions, are you planning on releasing another one? Because I know it's going to be hard to get 100,000, but I think with enough press, especially when Mr. Bell comes back, who's going to be broadcasting literally as this show ends right here on this network. I think we could actually reach that number. What do you think?
No, I don't think we can. It's my intention is for the next petition to be in the post-disclosure world. It just takes too much effort and you have to promote it and get it out there. And again, 100,000 signatures in 30 days is brutally difficult, particularly with an issue like this. So, no, I have no plans for another petition until, I have a pretty good idea of the petition I'm going to put out in the post-disclosure world pretty quickly, and that'll be the disclosure petition, I think 8. Because disclosure, once we have capital D disclosure, small d disclosure only intensifies, right? And so we'll still be in disclosure mode, but it'll be small d disclosure, and it'll be all about what are we going to hear, how soon are we going to hear it, and what would help the process along. And, of course, PRG hopes to be involved with all of that.
Have you had, without releasing any names, have you had any notable politicians outside of the people that you've been speaking to, or any notable celebrities reach out to you saying, applauding your work as everyone else does publicly?
No. It's you know how things are, right?
Absolutely, yes.
All of our calls are monitored.
Yes.
Surveillance is everywhere. And so the simple truth is that anybody out there, whatever their sentiments about this issue, has to believe that if they were to contact me in any way, phone, email, and say, I can't speak about this publicly, but right on, guy, that it could get out. It could get known. And so, again, under the truth embargo, as it's still operating, they can't deal with me at all. And trust me, that's the way it's been. Right? Look, I know the sentiments. There is a great deal of sentiment on Capitol Hill, and even in the military, towards getting this truth out. And most of these people know who I am, but they can't contact me.
Yes.
I've understood that for a long time. The day they start doing that, then you can just pretty much count the days to disclosure at that point. I mean, that means we're just so far along. But currently, no, you can't do it. What we get are retired military agency political people that turn up from time to time and that are ready to talk, perhaps. And these are the witnesses that have evolved. And there are reasons why they're able to do that. They're older, they're retired. As far as people in government, in the Pentagon, in the Congress, no. They know that they can't do that. Talk amongst themselves over a beer, but they can't talk to Steve Bassett.
Because especially in a post-Snowden world, we have a little over 2 minutes left, actually under 2 minutes, and I want to thank you officially before we go off air. Anything we can do to aid disclosure, we're always going to push it. And I want to turn the floor to you from now into the rainy music of what you'd like to say to everybody out there listening, which might include some politicians.
Well, one, invite people to the Contact in the Desert, May 29th to May 31st. Just Google Contact in the Desert. The site comes right up. It's going to be quite an event, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people. It'll be a little cooler because it's in May this time. To people out there that are looking forward to disclosure and want to see it happen, keep your energy up. For those that are getting a little overexcited, try not to do that. Don't get hyperbolic. Don't get carried away. We're getting close to the finish line, but you got to keep cool because, it doesn't help if we go a little nuts, a little crazy. It's keep it dignified. We'll all walk across the finish line together, but it is going to get very intense. You may see more disinformation turning up as you see some counter maneuvers by maybe government entities coming from desperation. It's very unpredictable what the last days of the truth embargo is going to be. So I invite people to be circumspect about that. And as far as members of Congress, the one thing I would want to let them know, I am there to get hearings, not to score media points. So Everybody I meet with, I do not divulge their names. I do not publicly discuss the content of our discussions. I won't do so unless I have authority or been approved by the people I'm talking to, so that people can feel comfortable about these meetings. And that's something that I want to make sure that's out there. In terms of the mainstream media we're talking to, believe me, we're being very aggressive there. So I'm keeping these separate, though. A very aggressive mainstream media approach, got a full-time publicist doing that, and a private, very sedate discussions with Hill staffers to eventually get a commit. We've got the witnesses. We can put 30 to 40 witnesses in Washington on 2 weeks' notice. Paradigm Research Group is committed to pay the expenses of everyone who can't afford to pay their expenses because the government doesn't pay them unless you're subpoenaed. But I don't expect to have any trouble raising the money for that. But we could do it in 2 or 3 weeks. We could have 20, 30 witnesses on the Hill. So, again, this could all happen very quickly.
And we are absolutely making progress again. Fascinating interview. This video will be uploaded to YouTube in a matter of days. Special thanks to Stephen Bassett and, of course, Congressman Cook. Also, special thanks to my co-host, Johnny Webb, live in London, Danny, for helping me with the tweets, and, of course, Keith Rowland for operating the network, and Art Bell for being the inspiration of being a talk radio host. This is Dr. J signing off.